Please. Oh gosh. Ignore those stray bits that I missed. I'm always missing bits when I do my hair. I decided to try something different with my hair today. And it's something, alright. My French doesn't want to sit right. Okay, so I am very late at doing my May wrap up. Normally my excuse is laziness. I can never be bothered to edit videos once I film them, but this time I just haven't filmed it. I just never got around to it. I knew I wanted to sit down, maybe put a little bit of makeup on, do my hair, although it's a look. This is a look, I tell you. And those straight bits are driving me mad. I'm going to try and do this in the order that I read them. I've got my Goodreads. I also have a list here. Depending on how I noted them on my Goodreads, I'm going to go off of that. But the month of May was actually a pretty good reading month for me. I read 14 books in total. One of them was an ebook, the rest were all paperbacks. Originally, I didn't have any plans for May. That's a lie. I had the books for the Brave Readathon. I had 3 books to read for that. And then I also decided to take part in the Royal Readathon, and it had a total of 14 prompts. So I was able to sort of insert my books for the Brave books to fit to some of those prompts, so that I didn't have to read even more books, and the rest I was able to find books to fit the prompts. Books that I had not yet read, and then books I was also planning to reread, because I've been currently reading Twilight for the first time. I'm doing a reread of the Hunger Games. I'm also doing a reread of the Harry Potters. I'll get into that in a little minute. I'm also reading the Chronicles of Narnia series for the first time, and a few other kind of children/teen novels that I'd had since I was a child and I wanted to reread them. I managed to kind of scrape together books that, like I said, that were kind of what I was wanting to read. Yeah, I did okay. So I'm going to do this in order of how I read them. I've got a list here of all the books for the Royal Readathon and the prompts. I'm going to try not to ramble too much because I have quite a lot of books here and I don't want this video to be too long. So the first book that I read was for the prompt Snow White, a book with an animal on the cover, and I read for The Horse and His Boy. This is the 3rd book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. It was okay. Probably reading this series for the first time as an adult, I'm finding a lot of flaws almost. I maybe would have enjoyed them more as a child. I think most books are kind of like that. If you read them first when you're younger, when you reread them, you kind of get that nostalgia. You maybe enjoy them a little bit more, but whereas I was a bit kind of like, okay. But it was fine. I didn't like it as much. I think my favourite probably is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I did not read this one first. You know what one I actually read first? I just realised. The first book I decided to read was one I'd literally just read like a couple months ago. The prompt was Elsa, a book set in winter, and I could not for the life of me think of a book that I owned. I wanted to find a book that was predominantly set in winter, so in the end I just went for The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I googled books set in winter, and this is like the first one that came up, and I thought, well, I have that. I just read it not that long ago, literally like February, so I just quickly read it first and I flew through it in like only a couple of hours. I can't remember what I gave this original when I first read it, maybe about like 5 stars or something, I'm not sure. But I just decided to reread this for my first prompt. But this is probably my favourite so far of the series, probably because I absolutely love the movie and I just love like the Pevensey children and their kind of stories, so I think I prefer this one the most so far of what I've read. I still have 2 books to go. This one's definitely my favourite, but I read this one first, and that was for a book set in winter. Then that same day I followed up with The Horse and His Boy. I didn't like it as much as I say, but I still think it was okay. It was a pretty good book. I gave it, what did I give it? I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I was being generous. Then after that, I had another 4-star read, and this was, let me see, where are we? I'm lost in this. Pocahontas, a book with a battle or a war, and I decided to go for Prince Caspian, the 4th book in the series, so I just followed them on one after the other. I pretty enjoyed this book. I maybe only liked it because I absolutely love the movie. I've watched that movie countless times. Ben Barnes, I love him. I love him. I feel like it isn't as action packed as the movies. I found that even with The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the movie definitely threw in a lot more action and excitement, whereas it was a bit more kind of slow paced, but it was still okay. I felt kind of weird for having like a crush on Prince Caspian because he's like a child in this, but I mean in the movie he's a man. He's a man. But I still gave this book 4 stars because I thought, like I said, maybe it doesn't affect me the same because I haven't read them before or as a child, so I'm not getting that nostalgic happy feeling, but oh well, it was still pretty good. The Penses were back. I love that movie. I love it. Next up we have Merida, a book with no romance. This was actually quite a hard one. This is actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because you know most books really do have some sort of romance thrown in, and in the end this book had a teeny little bit, just a teeny little bit. But I decided to go for a reread of one of my favourite books as a child, and that was The Amazing Story of Adolphus Tips by Michael Morpurgo. Michael Morpurgo is the author of War Horse, you know, that one movie with Benedict Cumberbatch and Tom Hiddleston. I love it. It's also a stage show, I think. Yeah, it is. He's an amazing war author. He writes a lot of war stories, a lot of them centred around animals. They're great for children, but they have that kind of darkness about them that I feel like as a child you maybe don't quite pick up on it the same, but you do as an adult, and they're still quite sad stories. He's not afraid to really like kill off characters or have darker themes. So for a child's story, it's just quite dark at times, but it's also quite informative. I read a lot of his books as a child. That probably traumatized me for life. It's basically the story of a young girl called Lily. Her town is basically being like taken over by the army. This book is set during the Second World War, so you know when like the army would take over towns and basically people had to like leave their homes so that they could like train before they were gonna go like storm the beaches in Europe. So Lily and her family, they own a farm. They end up moving to her uncle's farm, and her cat Tips, those little Tips there, ends up slipping under like the fences and goes into the no man's land. Lily goes after her a couple of times to try and find her. It's a great story, like I said, all about just kind of war and told from a child's perspective. It's great. It's a great story. I gave this 5 stars. On to another 5-star read, Anna, a book about family. I went for another Michael Morpurgo book, which is called Private Peaceful. It's another war story. It's about 2 brothers. It's basically about their life growing up, and then once they're like 17 and 18, or 16 and 17, 16 and 18, they both sign up and go to war. So it's sad. This is sad. This used to be one of my favourite books growing up, but it's sad. It's really dark as well. Like, this is the things that happen in it. There's a bit of romance, there's a lot of death, there's a lot of animal deaths. Michael Morpurgo is not afraid to kill off animals, I tell you. But I gave this 5 stars. It was just as good as I remembered it. I loved it. I loved it. By this point, I think in the month we had moved on. It was the time for me to start my Books for the Brave. Like I said, I was able to incorporate the 2 readathons together. For the Books for the Brave, one of my prompts was to read a book that had NH or S in the title or in the author's name. And for the Royal Readathon, I went for Mulan, a book with a strong female lead. And so for that, I chose The Hunger Games. I wanted to do a reread of The Hunger Games for the new book coming out, which I haven't even bothered to get yet, and I haven't even bothered to read anymore. I decided to do a reread of The Hunger Games, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, I think. I gave it 4 out of 5, because I feel like it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. I forgot how much I love this series. I love this cover, by the way. I love simple black covers with like a symbol on the front. That, to me, that catches my eye. I really enjoyed rereading this book, and I can't wait to reread the others. Then we have, for the Books for the Brave, it was read a book with a brave main character, and in the Royal Readathon, Moana, a book with a chosen one. So because I was currently doing a reread of the series, I decided to go for Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I chose the right time to do a reread of the series, guys. Where I'm kind of considering doing a whole video just talking about recent events regarding this series and its author, because I was originally planning to reread the whole series and then do reviews on each book. I've already done a review for the first one, and I was going to be doing a review for this. I was just about to film my review for the second one when certain events, certain things were said on Twitter, and there's a lot of discussion going on right now about the series and its creator, and I kind of want to make a video on it just to discuss my thoughts, because I do feel like I don't really want to support this series anymore in the sense of like giving my money towards it. But it's so hard because Harry Potter is one of those things. It's such a massive part of my life. It was one of the first fandoms I joined. I will always love Harry Potter and the Wizarding World. I have memorabilia. I literally put on bed sheets that I just got, and then that night Twitter exploded, and I was just sitting there looking at my bedding like, Why JK? Why? Honestly, it is one of the most disappointing things ever. It is so disappointing. I may make a whole video on this to move forward because I really don't know. I feel like, well, right now it is not the right time to be making Harry Potter related videos, reviews on the series, so I'm not going to do that. Maybe in time I might, but I'm a little undecided. Like, can you make the exception just because we love the series so much, or a lot of people do love the series? It's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation, but for the most part at the moment I'm not going to be continuing doing my reviews of them. I maybe will at some point. It's really hard, as I say, like, can you separate the art from the artist? There are plenty of ways that you could still love Harry Potter. You can watch the movies if you have them. You can reread the books if you own them. Giving away, I've seen people saying about how they're going to give away their Harry Potter products, and I feel like unless you're already planning to do it, unless you feel like you want to offload some of your books, unhaul them, I can see why. But at the end of the day, you already own all that stuff. You've already bought it. Whether it was gifted to you or maybe you bought it secondhand, you already have that. You've already given her your money. I have nothing against anybody that wants to keep loving this series. If you want to do that, you can. 100%. I won't judge anybody for that. I personally, I just bought Harry Potter stuff not that long ago, and I feel really disappointed that the creator of this world that I love so much has done this. It's disheartening whenever someone you admire turns out to be not a very nice human being. As I say, I may make a whole video on this, just kind of discussing my thoughts and how I feel moving forward with Harry Potter, but for the time being, I gave this book 5 stars. It's the second book in the series. It was good. Next up we have A Book That Intimidates You was the prompt for the book for the brave, and then on this I chose for Aurora, a book that has been on your shelf for a long time. I couldn't think of anything better to read for A Book That Intimidates You as Twilight. I have never read the series before. I used to be obsessed with the movies, but I'd never read the books, and I've had them for years. I got them one Christmas like years ago, and I'd never ever read them. So I finally decided this was the time. And you know what? I really enjoyed this. I made a whole video of my experience reading this, and honestly, it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. I gave it 4 to 5 stars, and I did not expect to like it as much as I did. I will admit though, I had a few issues with Bella and just her kind of, the way she carried on, the fact that I didn't feel like she had very much of a personality apart from the fact that she was in love with Edward, but you know, apart from that, it was fine. It was fine. I liked it. Next up we have Belle, a retelling. I had absolutely no idea what I was going to read for this prompt. I couldn't think of any books I had that were like a retelling, but then I found one. And it was another Michael McParkle book, and it's Arthur, High King of Britain. This is a story about the legend of King Arthur. It was pretty good. I've had this for years and I'd never read it. I gave this 4 stars out of 5. It was pretty decent. I liked it. There were times it was a little bit too childish in the sense of like things happened, people fell out, but then they were all like basically killing each other's families, but then they would talk it out and then they'd all be hugging and like, oh yeah, we're knights of the round table, we're best buds now. So there was that. Guinevere didn't even get burned at the stake. She was about to get burned, but then Lancelot rode in and saved her, and I was a bit like, wait, that didn't happen. Didn't she die? Didn't she get burned at the stake? So there were aspects where I was like, it was a little bit too childish in that sense of like, everything's okay and they all lived happily ever after. But apart from that, it was pretty good, and I do love the story of King Arthur. Okay, next we have Jasmine, a book with deception. I really didn't know what to go for this one. I was a little bit unsure. I couldn't really think of a book with deception. I thought, how am I going to know if there's deception in it unless I read it? But in the end I decided to carry on with the Harry Potter series, and I went for the Prisoner of Azkaban because I figured there's deception in that, really. Scabbers, Sirius Black, it's kind of deceptive. So I went for that. I enjoyed it. Again, this one was my favourite of the movies. It's a pretty good book. I had a few issues with it that I was going to talk about in my review, but we'll see. We'll see if I really wanna go down that route. But I gave it 5 stars. Then we had an ebook. Now this was Cinderella, a book with a princess protagonist. I absolutely no idea what to read for this prompt. I couldn't think of a single book I owned that had a princess. I didn't want to go for any of the Narnia books because they're not really, like Lucy is a queen. She a queen, girl. She a queen. So I had absolutely no idea what to go for, and I don't have a lot of like fantasy books really, so I don't have any like princess books. So I went into my ebooks, kind of scrolled through all the books that I had saved to my library, and I came across this one. I don't even remember downloading it. I know it was a free book. because if I have something in the ebooks, I guarantee it's because I got it for free. I'm not sure I have like a hard copy of a book. I'm not a massive ebook fan. I don't mind it. I think it is a good way to like read on the go, but I prefer to have like the actual book. So I don't actually pay for ebooks. I just go through the free charts and download all the classics and stuff. I remember getting this book. Actually no, I don't remember getting this book. I don't remember when I would download this book. I must have thought, I don't know what I was thinking. I must have thought it was going to be interesting. I'm gonna have to do a review on this book, by the way, because honestly, trash. It was trash. It's called, I should have realised from the title, it's called The Bitches of Ever After. The Bitches of Ever After. That title should have made me realise. A fairy tale can be a real nightmare. Ever After Trilogy Book 1. A dark princess fairy tale. So I was like, great! This is great! Princesses! Well, let me tell you something about this book. Our story begins with our main characters in a car. We have Snow White, Cinderella, but she goes by Cinder, Rapunzel, but she goes by Punzi, Aurora, I think she still goes by, like Sleeping Beauty, I think she still goes by Aurora, and Belle, but she goes by Bella. You could tell something was up when they were driving in this little car. I know that the book is called The Bitches of Ever After, but oh my god, the amount of times the word bitch was used in this series was unreal. And I mean by everybody. Everybody was calling these people bitches. They were calling each other bitches. Now don't get me wrong, I love the B word. I love it. I call people bitch all the time in like a funny comedic way. But this was honestly, it was too much. It was used far too much, that word. But it was honestly, it was trash. It was terrible. I hated it. The story was pretty weak. There were a lot of good references thrown in, like all the different characters had names relating to a fairy tale characters, so that was great. I really enjoyed that. Like there was a lot of characters thrown in. I was like, oh my god, no way, that's great. The story itself though was a bit trash. It literally ended on what I would class as a cliffhanger when nothing really happened, and I was like, yo, I don't care enough about this series to buy the next book to figure out what happens. I noticed a few reviews kind of said that like it literally just ends and your life kind of like I get that it's a trilogy, okay, like the way The Hunger Games is a trilogy, but each book in the series ends in a way where you're satisfied. Like you could read the whole of The Hunger Games and just leave it there and be satisfied. Yeah, you'll maybe be wondering like, well, I wonder what life for Katniss is going to be like now that she's won the games, but you could leave it there because it ends with her winning the games. And that's it. Is that a spoiler for The Hunger Games? I'm so sorry. But whereas with this ends in a way, it's left on a cliffhanger. And I don't like when books are left on a... Okay, I feel like it can be done in a way if it's quite clever. Each book in the series ends in a way that you could leave it there and not pick it up again. Because the story, the overall story is still carrying on. But the primal story for that book is done. Get what I'm saying? Okay, moving on. Moving on from that. Then I read... What did I mention? The Bitches of Ever After. I only gave it 2 stars. I would have gave it 1 star, but there were moments where I feel like it was okay. So I gave it a 2 star. A book has to be really shit for me to give it a 1 star. I don't think I've ever given it 1 star. I'm too nice. Next up, Rapunzel, a book with an adventure. And I went for the last book in the Lord of the Rings series, The Return of the King. My series is split into like 6 separate books. Each book had 2 parts. It was technically 2 books, but I'm only going to count it as 1 because it's the same story, really. You know, that's just one good book. The first one, The Return of the King, book 5, The War of the Ring, was more focused on like Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, when they're in Gondor fighting Pippin and Merry, it's like their story. Whereas The Return of the King, book 6, The End of the Third Age, it's Frodo and Sam on their way to Mordor, and then later on when they're back at the Shire. I didn't realise they had like a little fight at the Shire when they get back. I was like, that was a pleasant surprise. Imagine if they put that at the end of the movie. That movie would have been about 4 hours long if they included that. It was already a pretty long movie. I gave this 5 stars. Did I really? I gave this 5 stars. Wow, I must have been feeling generous on that day. I gave this book 5 stars, apparently. I did really enjoy it. I love a final battle. It was pretty good. I love Éowyn. I can't say how to pronounce her name. Éowyn, King Theoden's niece, I think she is. When she like dresses up and goes to battle, because I was really hoping that was going to be in the books, because I know it was in the movie, and I really hoped it was going to be in the books, and it was. And she took down the ring wraith. She took down something. No, she took down somebody, and it was amazing. I was like, yes, yes, yes. That was amazing. I love that. I love her. So that was pretty good. I love these books. I gave them 5 stars. Then I had Ariel, a book set out at sea. I decided by this point to continue on with The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia series, and I went for The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It follows the story of like Prince Caspian as they go in search of 7 lords. Is it the 7 lords that his uncle had banished? I remember I have seen the movie. I only watched it a few times, so I don't remember an awful lot about it. So whereas with the other 2, I knew the movies pretty well, so I knew the books when things were happening. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I kind of knew what was coming. Whereas with this, I couldn't remember anything really. I couldn't remember much at all about what happened in the movie. It's not my favourite. The movie was never my favourite. Still love Ben Barnes though. So the book was, I felt like it was okay. Everything was very much like, whenever something happened, it was always Aslan coming to rescue them. There's a bee on my window. Hi, my name's Michael with a bee. Where's the bee? There's a bee! I love that vine. Why is it just sitting in my window like that? Sir, are you lost? Maybe he recognizes me as a queen. But yeah, anytime something happened, it was always like they would start arguing, and then Lucy would suddenly be like, look there, it's Aslan, and then they would all see him, but then he would disappear, and it's like, and then they would all suddenly feel better, and it was like, really Aslan. Aslan kept popping up to save the day, but then he would disappear almost straight away. Lastly, the final book that I had to read was Tiana, and it was a book with a Black, Asian or minority ethnic lead. To begin with, I was going to be reading Colour Bar, A United Kingdom, which is the true story of Seretse Khama and his relationship with a white woman called Ruth Williams. They meet while he's studying in London and they end up getting married, and this causes a lot of drama because at the time, it's 1947. At that time, it was very taboo. People were very against a black person marrying a white person. So it's basically their story of how they fell in love and just the repercussions that came after that from their marriage. I'd actually already started this book years ago, I think. I'd read like a few chapters into it. I'm very slow when it comes to reading non-fiction books. The writing in this is tiny. I judge a book based on the size of its writing, okay? If it's small, it puts me off. If it's big, I'm like, yes, fly through that. I was originally going to read this, and by the time I finally got round to it, by the time I kind of finished everything else, I still had to finish The Return of the King, and I still had to finish The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It was the last day of May. I didn't think I'd be able to read all of this in a day. So I changed my book, and I decided instead to go with The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I read this book. That bee is still sitting there. Why is it just sitting there? I had already read this book, I think last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago actually. I read it before. I loved it. I think I gave it 5 stars, and I decided to read it again to fill the prompt. And I'm so glad I did, because I forgot how good this story is. Like, it's probably one of my favourite books. I absolutely love the characters. I love Star. I love Star's family. And the story itself is just so, it's so heartbreaking. I definitely recommend this book to anybody if you're looking for a good book to read, but also a book that really kind of, it makes you think, because even though it's not real, the situation, the reality of the story is very real. It's one of those stories I feel like I absolutely love it, but I also hate it. I hate how it ends. I hate how, I don't want to spoil it, but I hate how essentially the story doesn't really have a happy ending. It does and it doesn't. I love the author's writing style. I saw on Goodreads she's going to be doing a sequel about the father, about her parents and the main character's parents. I'm so excited to read that. I just absolutely love it. I feel like it's such a good story and sad, but I highly recommend it. I'm so glad I reread it. I forgot how good it is. The movie is really good as well. Oh, this is not a good pile. There's all my books for May. I did well. I'm actually pretty impressed with this. This is not like me at all. I read 14 books in total, and I took part in 2 readathons, so yeah, that's great. Like I said already, I think I may make a video on JK Rowling, and just the Harry Potter situation, because I kind of want to get a few things off my chest. I kind of just want to talk about a few things, and then from there I want to decide what I'm going to do with the series. I might just reread them and just not talk about them, or I may do reviews, but we shall see. At the moment, no, it ain't the time. It is not the time to be giving her any more support, publicity. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I shall see you in my next one, whatever that may be. Goodbye!